Welcome to Holly's Pandorium, featuring your host, psychic medium Holly Jordan.
Hey everybody, we're back. This is Holly from Holly's Pandorium, coming to you from the very sunny and beautiful state of Washington. It's not raining, you guys. I swear, it's not raining. It's actually sunny and kind of amazing. And I'm happy to introduce to you someone who lives in my area. Oh my gosh, this does not happen very often, so I'm very excited. So this is Ben Robison, and I just kind of met on Facebook, and he's got lots of cool stories. I've heard a little bit of them, but I can't wait to hear more. So grab your popcorn, get your favorite whoopee, curl up on the couch, and get ready. We got some cool stories coming your way. So welcome, Ben. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I would love to hear, and the listeners and viewers would like to hear, what brought you to the paranormal? How did that happen?
I think I'm kind of one of those people that, believe in fate and things that are kismet, right? I think it's just the familial line, we were always open to that. My mother, she's the one that really, blossomed this concept of, the paranormal or the supernatural. My father, was big into ufology and things like that, but that's one thing, right? But luckily for me, I've had a fair amount of personal experiences that were very profound and life shaping in that respect to really form me into, and I tell this to people all the time, I'm a believer. I'm a very, I try to use a critical lens and a skeptical, mindset when approaching my research. But overall, I'm a believer.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
Can you take us back to maybe your first experience with the paranormal where you kind of went, whoa, that seems real. What is that?
The one that always comes to mind was actually here in Vancouver. My grandparents, my grandfather was a Pearl Harbor survivor, and when my grandmother and him met, and they decided to elope and do all that, start having a family, they built a house here, and so they built this house, and they had a total of 5 kids. The house didn't have that many rooms, so they decided to build a full basement at one point, and so they did. And I was staying in this many years. My father's, my father, he's got me at that point, and I'm visiting with him, and he's living down in the basement. And I'll never forget, we were and let me back up a second. This house, I've lived there myself as an adult, later on in life and whatnot. It's no longer there, but I never experienced anything what I would call supernatural other than this. And now, mind you, I'm a little child, but you were asking, my first experience, and the one that I can recall was, we're laying on one of those sofa couches. Or
Sure.
I'm sorry, sofa couches.
Hide-a-bed.
Hide-a-bed. Thank you so much. And my father and I were, getting ready to, go to sleep, and he was talking to me and maybe telling me something, a story or whatever. And all of a sudden, in this basement, now it did have some windows up towards the top, just small windows, but the light that we saw did not come from a window. It literally just started emitting right in front of like this closet armoire kind of like piece of furniture. And it literally, in some ways, it's very similar to like the brown lady, right? That kind of that shape, but it was not dark in color or anything. It was just kind of like a really kind of whitish misty color. And it got to a point where it kind of formed a very, humanoid shape. And all I know is that the impression I got from it, I felt like it was a lady, female. And then it dissipated. And I remember my dad and I sitting up in his bed, and he was like, whoa. And I was like, I didn't know any better. I was just like, what was that? But yeah. So that made me, I mean, obviously I'm 50 now. It stuck with me.
Sure.
So I would assume it was more genuine and organic of an experience than something manufactured by like a reflection off of a headlight to a sign, which bounced into the room. I mean, all of that's very plausible, and I understand and can see that those are, but there's also this feeling, this thing. I mean, I was a little child at that time too, so I think that was definitely my first paranormal, supernatural experience, if you will.
Okay.
Now, around that time, though, while I was with my mother, we were camping up in by Beacon Rock.
Okay.
Up there at that campground there, Beaver Creek is what it's called.
Okay.
My mom tells me to this day, she was like, there was like 3 or 4 families, if I remember correctly, camping together, and we were one of them, and we had a Bigfoot that I saw and other kids and people saw go by our campsite when I was a little kid in probably either the late 70s, if not early 80s. So yeah, it was pretty weird, but I don't remember that one.
No.
Matter of fact, I forgot all about it. And we were talking one time, and she was like, "You remember when the one up at the Beaver Creek campground?" And I was like, so I've had my own personal one that I can remember with what I believe to be a Sasquatch. But that was, several years later. So
how about you share that real quick? What happened then, and what were you doing?
it was the let me think here. It was like probably the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived up in a little town called Matlock, Washington. At this time, and I think it was right close to when they stopped doing that, but they had those things called hardship licenses.
Sure.
And I was 12 and I got one. And so I was able to drive in rural
12?
areas.
Wait a minute.
No joke. Yes.
12 years old.
Yes. I had a hardship permit, I guess is what it's really called. They don't do that anymore, and probably for good reason. But again, this is the 80s. And so, yeah, at 12 years old, I was allowed to drive around rural Matlock area. And that's up kind of on the Olympic Peninsula, kind of Shelton, a little north of that. And we had this Dodge pickup, rusty old thing with a wooden flatbed off the back. And I was driving it. I've been driving for actually a little while now at this point. And what it was there's a gentleman that I lived with at that time who worked out in the woods. And what he did is he picked things like ferns and salal and mushrooms and pine cones, and they'd use them for, things like florists, or like, I remember one time we did a bunch of it for the Empire Strikes Back set, things like that. Right.
Sure.
So he'd have me drop him off out somewhere, and I'd come pick him up or bring him, a lunch at one point and what have you. And it was fun for me because I got to drive. It was a blast. Yeah. And so here I am going down this highway towards technically the center, the city center or town center of Matlock. But, I'm on this 2-lane highway. And on the left side of me is all clear cut. And on the right is they hadn't touched it yet. And at this point in time, it was starting to snow and stick on the road. And so here I am driving down the road. And what again, you have to understand, I'm a 12-year-old kid. So what I think was about a mile in front of me, I saw something very dark-haired, bipedal, come out from the left of the clear cut and go up onto the highway, across it, and then down and into the woods that had not been logged. And immediately, my immediate thought was that a Bigfoot? So I drove down. I stopped to about where I thought, it crossed, because, like I said, there was snow sticking on the ground. And so I was like, I'm for sure going to see, footprints. I didn't see them where I stopped, and another vehicle was coming up behind me. So I had to get back in and continue on. So I'm pretty sure what I saw was a Sasquatch.
That's awesome.
And yeah, that was pretty rad.
I bet.
Pretty rad.
So that's at least 3 experiences before you're even 15 years old.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They say a lot of this can happen with children because, as children, you're less programmed or, influenced, brainwashed, all those things, whatever.
Right. You're more open.
You're more open. You're more, in some ways that phrase, ignorance is bliss, is very true in this case.
Yeah. But I think that kids many times are just able to see things. And again, I think your explanation is perfect. They're not brainwashed into not seeing things.
Yeah.
I think people take for granted how innocent children are, that whatever's in front of them, it's real because I can see it. And that's all they need.
Absolutely. And also, I think even as adults, right, when we're focused, I got a family, I got a career, I've got a home, blah, blah, blah. Those things start to either pull you away from being open and considering those potentials. I had a huge paradigm shift happen when I lived in Central Oregon, and we were at like a Roadhouse diner. It was like daylight out. It was probably like 5 p.m., but it was daylight out, and we're in this Roadhouse restaurant or whatever. And my son, I'm gonna say he's probably about 6 or 7 at this point, and he says, "Dad, I got to use the bathroom." I said, "Okay." And I had never been to that restaurant and never used the restroom, of course, so I didn't know where it was. And I asked somebody, and they said, "Yeah, follow that gentleman right there." So we see this gentleman with this, kind of salt and peppered hair and kind of very short beard and like jeans on and brown like hiking boots and a belt and, like your typical, old man setup, like the flannel, not flannel, but like, a long sleeve shirt, button up, all that.
Right.
And we're following him. And he goes down to where it turns to the right, and he turns to the right. And as we come around that corner, I see he's nowhere there, but I see the door for the bathroom. And I'm like, oh. And so my assumption was, hey, this bathroom's got like, several stalls and whatnot. I open it up and go in, and I'm like, oh, and there's no guy, first off, but it's only one toilet, one sink, and a baby changing station, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what the hell just happened here? And my son goes, "Dad, where's that guy?" I was like, I don't know. So I had a huge paradigm shift. Well, maybe a better way to put it would be like an awakening, a reawakening, right? Of that third eye, if you will, or whatever, that sensory end of me. And yeah, I was like, I'm gonna start looking into like this, and I'm gonna start, considering a non-profit. And so, I spent a couple years, founding a new nonprofit, which at that time was called Paranormal and Occult Research Team. And ran that for 5 years. And, but it was that moment that kind of really was that catalyst, that kind of jump start to get me back into it. Because, like I was saying, I was focused on my career, my family, and that, I mean, I know that there's a juggle and there's a challenge in lying for all of us who do this kind of stuff, to not sacrifice your family, your job and whatnot, for it. So I was up for that task, and you learn lessons and you figure it out as you go, but like you learn how to do something like that and still be engaged in your family, your job, and what have you. But yeah, I got formally into paranormal research around then, and that's where it's gone from there.
That's amazing. And it's not something that, I mean, not every experiencer pivots and puts that into a working, functional hobby.
Right.
A lot of experiencers are there just to breathe and take it all in, and that's good enough. And that's where it is. You have this one cool story you share, or you notice things at certain places or whatever it is, but it's all encompassed in just the story itself. It doesn't go past that.
Right.
But I know that for those of us that have that on our hearts to go beyond and to continue and to find and look and just to be aware of all the possibilities, it's daunting. There's so much involved.
And actually what a lot of people don't realize, because, I blame Hollywood for this, TV shows and whatnot, but it's not that exciting as you would think. I mean, I can't tell you how many hours I've spent, either in the dark or in the light, doing investigations, set up, tear down, then, the analysis phase where you're going through it. And obviously there was the research phase in the beginning, trying to, see what we could learn about, everything. So yeah, it's very daunting. And that was one of the things that I learned running PORT, Paranormal and Occult Research Team, that, we're not all cut from the same cloth. And this isn't a diss to the people I've had on my teams in the past. What I'm saying is, when I brought people on, I did my best to try to, explain to them, look, we're going to need help through all the phases of a case, research, analysis, all that stuff. We need all hands on deck. The more eyes, the better. When the more ears, the better. The more we can have more brains involved, the more diverse and more, I think we're going to get a better result or a better conclusion, to what we're researching or whatnot. So, but what I found was, for example, I'll just say, hey, I'd send out a message to my team and I'd say, hey, we got a new case, here's a little bit of understanding about it. We need to dive into the research of it. Oh, well, yeah, I'm kind of busy right now and I've got all the kids and blah, blah, blah. And and I'm like, that all comes first. That's priority. Absolutely. Is there a way you can maybe balance in a little bit here and there and help out? Oh, I'll try. And then they'd ghost you. And then the same thing would happen, or not the same thing would happen, but let's say then I'm like, yeah, we have an investigation, or we have some dates that we can do. I can make any date work. Wow. All of a sudden you can do anything. But when it was the research phase, you were really busy. The hard lifting, nobody wanted to do.
I've heard this from many ghost research teams. It's,
on board with like, yeah, I'm down to do the analysis. I'm like, awesome, cool, and that's good. But then when you really watch them, when they're analyzing, they would just like be doing other things, like on their phone or, talking to somebody else. And you're like, whoa, you're looking for anomalies here. You can't be multitasking. This has got to be what you focus on right now, because what's the point otherwise? You're potentially missing, stuff. And so, yeah, it can be a challenge. And so, so I tell people all the time, if you want to really truly get into paranormal research, you also have to have some thick skin too, because don't put up with the BS, and don't allow people to walk all over you and whatnot. But at the same time, know that you're just going to deal with some interesting people who sometimes have other agendas, that might be nefarious in some way. And
I've noticed that. So there are teams that, and I'm not going to single anybody out, but there's definitely teams that are all about clickbait. They just want something that people will click on a video on TikTok or wherever. And then there's other teams that are just curious. They don't really want to do research. They just want to try and have an experience. And then there's still other teams that are very concerned about their credibility. They want to be precise. They want to be systematic, and they want to carefully go through each thing. And sometimes they can be overly cautious. I've noticed where, they're super careful. I have friends that have been in research for over 40 years doing this in different states. And the ones I have found that have been very successful are the ones that keep their teams really tiny. And they have a very systematic approach to their equipment, to their testing. Their follow through is the same every time. They have a very extensive interview progress to begin with before they even go out somewhere. And that actually lends not just to their credibility, but it gives them some peace of mind that they've done absolutely everything they can to debunk whatever's going on first before they ever set foot on a site.
And those are all good things too. I think honestly you have, I mean, I know there are some, what would you call them? Enthusiasts. There we go. Armchair, investigators. And some of them turn into, people who are doing some kind of form of, if you will, investigative work. But I usually lump two groups together. You have your ghost hunters, and then you have your paranormal researchers or whatever. Typically, and I'm not saying this is, a hard rule, but like you do this long enough, and I've been to so many conferences, and I've taught classes, and you name it, met a lot of people and whatnot. But there are some people who just want to do it for the thrill. They have no real interest in, really trying to help further the field better. Again, they're all about the histrionics, the embellishments, the everything's an orb, and you name it. And they were once, an armchair enthusiast just like myself, but they chose to go in what I call a ghost hunter path versus paranormal research. Because really, when it comes to paranormal research, there's a few things that people seem to recognize or acknowledge, but actually don't put into practice. And what that is responsibility, respect, and dignity. And really what that boils down to is your quality of work. If you're sloppy and you make a lot of assumptions. We see a lot of people do this where they speak in absolutes. Well, ghosts are this and that. Well, no, actually, my friend, we don't know what they are made of. That's a fact. That is the fact. We don't know what they're made of. We know they're made of some kind of energy of some sort, but really any of these, gadgets, EMF meters, trifields, all that stuff, Geiger counters, they're environmental devices that are measuring the environment around us and we're looking for, the anomalies that should be really kind of correlated with an experience or some kind of, phenomena that took place. But
But I've even noticed a big difference with groups about how they approach entities that they suspect.
Yeah.
And I know from my own experience, not respecting what you don't understand is a huge error.
Yeah.
And, gentleness and total reverence for what you're dealing, because you don't know who you're talking to.
Exactly.
You have no idea what you're approaching, and you really don't know what they're capable of or not capable of.
Exactly.
And so acting like you know something you actually don't know isn't smart.
Well,
it's dangerous.
Yeah, it is. It's not. It's a reckless thing, and that's where I was talking about. That third thing is that responsibility. We're responsible for treating these people like people. They came and reached out to you because they're frightened or whatever. They need help. This isn't a way for you to become famous or rich.
Right.
It should be really about the task at hand, trying to see what you can understand. And so, like, I've told this story many a times to classes and people, in general, but like you said, the way people approach. And I like to say, this story is all fictitious, but it's very on the nose.
Okay.
Fred, lives in a house. His wife had passed, several years prior, and they'd been in this house for over 50 years. And Fred's kind of a, curmudgeon-y old guy, kind of a hermit. He's the kind of guy that when even the local parish knocks on the door and says, hey, we'd like to invite you over for, the potluck and whatnot. He's like, leave me alone, just go away. Right. And so Fred finally passes away. And so the house goes up for sale ultimately. And the Johnsons come along and the Johnsons buy the house. And the Johnsons are like, we love this house, but we want to also give it some of our own, personality and our own personal touches. And so they just, start doing some remodeling, right? So classic scenario, you're remodeling an old house, and whatnot. All of a sudden they start having these experiences and they seem kind of, frightening. So they're scared. So they reach out to, some paranormal groups and they talk to a few and they finally vet out one and they decide we'll go with, ABC Paranormal. ABC Paranormal prides themselves on their Christian faith base. And I'm like, okay, go for it, do that. But what happens is this group decides to come out and they take this approach with this house. And they're like, we'll help it move to the light, or we'll help, it move on, and we'll use, the Bible and all this verses and such to do this this task. Some of them even charge, but we'll go into that. But let's
we won't go there. Okay.
Yeah. They're there and they do their thing and they're praying and they do a blessing and all this stuff. They leave. Things get worse. Fred's pissed, right? I'm speaking for Fred in this fictitious story, but Fred's pissed. Okay. He's like, who are you and why are you here and why are you changing my home? Right. And then who are these people you brought in? What are they doing? Because I'm offended. I'm not Christian. I'm Native American. Mm-hmm. And that ego right there tells you, and I'm not blaming Christians, in general.
No,
like,
no,
I mean, you could be,
it's
whatever.
An example. I get it.
It's an example, and it's a good example because, that's going to be something you will see in this field. But it's an arrogant thing, which I think is kind of funny, in many ways, because really we shouldn't have any arrogance. We shouldn't be speaking in absolutes. We shouldn't say,
right,
oh yeah, that's how it works. I've heard people argue about how thermal imaging is, one of the best paranormal research tools ever. And that just goes to show you don't know how that technology works.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah. So when you're teaching classes to people, have they predominantly been about the research end of things and how to set up for research? Is that what your focus is at?
That's always been my favorite thing to do. That's not that I don't want to talk about other things. I do. And actually, I have something that I've been playing around with that if I go, this next year to Port Gamble Ghost Conference, I might do something like this. But what I'm getting at is mostly focused on research and methodologies and things to consider. The goal has been so far, in any of the classes or, lectures I've spoke at and whatnot, I want to try to help raise the bar is all.
Right.
I just want to move this field forward with people who are armed with better, stronger, realistic, information or ways to go about things. I'm not saying my way is the most perfect way or the best way. And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, we got to be a lot more cognizant of what we're doing in this field.
Right. I think one of my favorite things that I love sharing with researchers is, again, the Hollywood notion of spirits only come out at night when it's dark.
Yeah. That's such a
I have been a psychic medium my entire life. I'm 62 years old. They're around 24/7, 365. They are not affected by daylight adversely. They are not vampires. They do not have a problem with daylight.
And that's, again, thanks to Hollywood,
and so,
right?
Yeah.
Everything's lights out. It's all in night vision nowadays. So everybody thinks that's how it's got to be. And it's just not real.
And the whole cemetery thing, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because yes, there's all this history and all these legends about things happening at cemeteries. But the truth is that is equivalent to walking into somebody's living room when they're resting. And when you barge in there at night, you are asking for trouble. You are asking to get bombarded. It's very naughty.
If, in fact, they do reside there. But that's the other assumption we all make. And are they even there? Right? I've done my fair share. Some
are, and some are not.
Some are. Right. Absolutely. It's just,
but
we don't know what the factors are, or if it's a choice they get to make, who knows?
Correct.
But I
love that. People assume that's a requirement. You can't talk to ghosts unless it's dark out.
Well, I've been working on, and I have pretty much like a hypothesis really, and it's called the SERM, SERM. Spectral emotion radio frequency to manifestation. And what that means is, I believe that the kind of equipment we're using, we'll just take a DAR, for example, DAR being a digital audio recorder is what I call them.
Okay, I was going to say, what is that?
And I know with your understanding of music and instruments and whatnot, you're going to understand this as well. But that DAR, whether it's an Olympus, a Sony, or, you name it, some, off-brand, they have what they call a frequency response range, a beginning and end frequency area. And that's the window that can record and hear that information in. Well, that's important. Here's why. Our body is composed of all sorts of things like myocardiocytes, the synapses, they all fire. We have these electrical powerhouses within us. We actually have a way to measure the frequency of my body, your body, anybody's body. And it's got all sorts of factors that come into play: your health, the environment, age, injury, whatever, right? But you have your own frequency. Now, when people are going into these places, and I'm just as guilty, I'm not saying that we're doing anything wrong necessarily, but just to set the stage here, when we're going into places and we're asking things like, do you know that you're dead, or how did you die, or do you miss so and so, now that you're gone, we're evoking emotion. So that's where the radio frequency, the spectral radio, wow, words are hard right now.
That's okay.
Spectral emotion, right, comes into play, meaning we're coming to them, the living, and we're trying to just grill them about all sorts of things. And a lot of times, if you really think about it from a humane perspective, they're very intrusive personal questions we're asking. Now,
Yeah.
that might in fact cause an emotional change. Well, right now we'll just say, I'm at a certain frequency, but if you were to ask me something that maybe, let's say it upsets me in a bad way, hurts my feelings or whatever, my frequency will change. So let's say they are trying to respond to you, and let's say I said something like, that's very intrusive and very personal, like, how did you kill yourself, right? Let's say we suspect it as, suicide. That response could go from a very docile to a very upset, emotional. And what if, in theory, because I just explained to you that my emotion just alone changing can change the frequency. So let's say we take that DAR again, and it's got a frequency that starts here, that it can accept any data that comes in. It can hear it and record it to here. That individual I asked that very intrusive personal question may go from a certain frequency and then go outside of the realm, that frequency response range of that device. And why do you think we get so many snippets? Not full sentences. We don't get conversations. We're not sitting there going, yo, hey, what did you drink today, man? We're not getting that kind of thing in our a captured anomalous phenomena on Medium. So that might lend credence to the fact that this hypothesis I have might mean that when they do change that emotion in a response, maybe to the onslaught of questions, that device it didn't have a big enough window to capture it all. So the thought then is, and this is where I'm like, trying to figure it out further on a technical level, is marrying several different technologies together. So like, for example, I'm really kind of taking this on a basic, level, because there's no real need to get technical about it. But what I'm saying is, you could have a DAR, it responds, it'll record from this frequency to that frequency. Now you have we'll just, say a full spectrum camera. Well, it kind of overlaps a little bit of the frequencies, but it's still covering that and then taking it further. And then let's say you have an IR infrared, night vision camera. You have a Geiger meter, and you have an EMF meter, and they all have their own frequency response ranges as well. If you can marry all those together and then data log it, so that way when you and I are walking around in a location and all of a sudden I feel a tug on my shirt and I'm like, whoa, I just felt a tug. And you're like, wait, I just heard something. That piece of equipment captured all of it with all of those pieces of technology married together and data logged it. And now your personal experience goes from I might have that on recording to I have it on several things, and it literally gave us a larger window of information.
Which would be amazing.
That may not come just satisfying to some, because what I'm saying is, like, it could start as an EVP and end up as a video image, right? So there has to be some sleuthing, if you will, or tying of that data together to, again, okay, does this corroborate? Does this really play into?
Does it make sense?
Yeah, exactly. Does it make sense to our case as we know, it right now? So
I'm curious about something, since you're involved in the technical end of the gear for doing this type of research. How does one calibrate electronic devices that are measuring waves? Is that even possible? I mean, how do you know it's working correctly?
Okay, so awesome question. My background is in telecom. I started off in like the cable, TV industry, setting pedestals, ground rods. Then I started splicing equipment. I ended up working for the company, and doing things like launching phone, high-speed internet. But along that way came a lot of education, and that is in RF, radio frequency. Well, that is the vital common core, if you will, when it comes to technology that most of us ghost hunters, paranormal researchers are using, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess I don't know. There are caveats to everything, I guess. But what I'm trying to say here is, we use them to help us understand things better, but we also need to understand their limitations. We also need to understand things like, problems they can have. Well, most of the gear we're buying, for example, I have a natural EMF meter that's made by Trifield, the company, who, was the one that everybody saw, especially when Ghost Adventures was using the analog needle, EMF meter. Because what I will, probably one thing I'll give that crew of people credit for is that they were using a Trifield meter, having that triple axis. The problem is they're super delicate. You need to really take care of them. They should be always stored and carried and not jostled around or thrown down or anything. And I see that abused all the time because you can't calibrate those things. They'll go out of calibration. You can't recalibrate them. I've reached out to the company that makes that Trifield and whatnot, and I have a digital version of a Trifield that's made by Tenmars, and it does data logging. There's those models that we're buying, which are hundreds of dollars in value, still are the low end. And so they're not the ones that typically you can send back to them and have them calibrate. So what you have to do, and I've done this before, is, if you have more than two kinds, or it doesn't even have to be different models or anything. Different models is great too. But, if you have different EMF meters, what you do is you put them together on, and you turn on something that that's going to put out a certain amount of EMF. And so you try to figure out, okay, where is the average here, or where, or are they all dialed in at the same, still and all accurate? So there's really no recalibrating. And that's unfortunate, because in the telecom world that I come from, we have oscillators, we have all sorts of meters that are designed to do certain things. Look at what they call QAM, which is quadrature amplitude modulation, all these different avenues, different facets and angles of radio frequency, and especially in the digital realm, that they have to have that ability to recalibrate them on the fly, right? In their head in, or wherever, their data center, or in a room that's been specifically designed for that. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but I've never met anybody that's working with any kind of gear that's that expensive that has the ability to be recalibrated, sent in and calibrated, or recalibrate it yourself by a certain procedure.
Because my knowledge of that type of equipment is minimal. And in my own mind, I've thought, okay, well, if they work on radio signals, to me, this is my own very rudimentary explanation of my own thought. A lot of those are running on a radio signal. Well, in a radio, if you hear something, you tune it in until you hear it better.
Yeah.
And so there's this very basic understanding of, if it's tuned in correctly to the right channel, then you hear the radio station. That's the very basics. We all have car radios, and whether it's internet
simple, that's
or
perfect.
FM, you tune it just right, and there it is.
Yeah.
But we all know the radio station signals are fragile.
Or the equipment we're using, like the radio ourselves, right, can go out of,
The antenna can be off. there can be all kinds of interference. There's all these things. And I've always wondered, when we're talking about signaling, like, for example, I know this may sound like a crazy reference. So my stepdad had to get a pacemaker, and a technician came to the hospital before he left. And this just blew me away. And this lady came in literally with a mouse. She logged into her little laptop that she brought with her, and she literally clicked the mouse pad over my dad's chest to tune it so that it was a better rhythm.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm in my brain, this is exploding. What? I wasn't there when it happened. My mom described it to me, and I'm thinking, she used a mouse pad to tune the pacemaker? What? I mean, it's all
probably
signal.
A device that looks just like a mouse, but like it's got that frequency, the transceiver. Yeah, exactly.
But it was just, my mom was just, mouth drop. What is happening? And it just, technology blows me away. And I know that there's so much that we don't understand and we don't know. And I just feel like when you're in the paranormal industry and you're trying to figure stuff out, there's all this shock and awe of, did I see a bipedal creature walk across that grassy field? Did something knock on the tree? Was there somebody walking and there's nobody there now? There's all these what ifs, and we're trying very clumsily at best to try and track it in some way that makes sense, some way that's solid. And some of these things are not solid.
No, it's not black and white. It's
not. It doesn't have the same molecules that we do. And it's like, you can't hand it a McDonald's hamburger and say, here, have lunch, because that's not how it operates. It doesn't work like that. You wouldn't feed that to a fish. Right? They're different. They're just so different. And I love that people are curious and they want to know more. But I'm glad that you said that, because I was very curious. How do you even know if they're working? It's like, to know if my scale's working in the bathroom, I get a 10-pound bag of flour and set it on there and see if it says 10 pounds, because I trust and know that that's pretty accurate.
I find that literally the high 90% range of people don't ever even think about it. It's never even something they're like, what do you mean? It still works. I'm like, yeah, it works. All right. But is it working the way it needs to be working? And do you understand how that is supposed to work? Right. Because like, we had an investigation in this Sublimity, Oregon many years ago when I was running port, and it was the damnedest thing. We set up a motion sensor, an IR motion sensor, in this particular closet upstairs, because there was supposedly some interesting phenomenon that may have been happening in that space. And so we set it up. It had kind of like built-in bookshelves inside this closet, and so we put it up on there, but we had it also facing a camcorder that was in night vision mode and everything, facing that closet, which was open. So anytime it got triggered, you would see a little red infrared light come on the thing, and then you'd hear its really big binger, right? Noise. So, well, where Sublimity sits is right off the highway, and a lot of trucking goes through there. And what we were finding was RF blasting was happening, and it was setting off the IR. We were even finding it happening at times from our walkie-talkie or two-way radios.
Right.
It would sometimes set it off. So it was giving us false positives, right? And so that's very, that's confusing. It just muddies the water, and you don't want that. But knowing that, then you can kind of have some better ways to, attack this situation, or you abandon that device and find something that's either shielded better or, different technology in general that doesn't have that potential of interference, crosstalk, whatever.
Right. So there's one thing that I've heard that I thought was fascinating that it didn't even occur to me, about your own cell phones. So when you go in a location, I've been told by people with more experience than me at doing these investigations that said you have to make sure and put your phone in airplane mode because the signals will throw the gear off.
Mm-hmm.
So can you speak to that? Can you talk
Sure,
about
yeah.
that a little bit?
I love it. I love to hear that. That's awesome to hear. And please do. Your phone's great to take with you, and it's great for safety purposes. If something were to happen, you can take it. Well, hopefully you are in a place where you can take it out of airplane mode and either call for help. But yes, there's a lot of instruments with inside these fancy phones we have these days, and they help us in many ways. This phone alone, I've used LiDAR technology at the Walker Ames house, which was absolutely fascinating to do with it. But, with that, you got to know that when you're in an investigative mode, if you're using this for like camera and recording purposes, few things I recommend. Definitely, most importantly, airplane mode. But make sure that even Wi-Fi and Bluetooth is shut off, because technically with airplane mode, you can turn those on. Okay.
Right.
So people need to know that they need to check it. They can't just trust, hey, no, it's fine. No, you need to go in and make sure, or just turn the phone off, whatever, if you don't plan to use it. But like, if you want to use it, that's fine. Just put it in airplane mode, make sure those antennas are turned off. And then the other thing I tell people all the time is don't use these apps. I don't know where we were at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park years ago, and there was a couple there. They were enthusiasts, and they had their phones, and they came to us and they're like, "You guys got to check this out. We're catching like chanting and singing in this room," and we're like, "What?" They start playing it, and immediately I look right at them like, "Let me see what you're using to record this with." They break out this like ghost app, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And sure enough, the more we played around with it, every recording it was inserting these ghostly sounds into it from the app itself. So it was just manufacturing lies.
Wow.
And they were buying it hook, line, and sinker. So, I just I tell people, use the native recording apps, or like actual, known ones like a Tascam app, or like Shure, or any of those, Behringer, and their actual accredited recording, companies, not people who are making
technology that's been around for years. Behringer's a very old company, and they're like Roland. They've been around a really long time.
Exactly. Perfect example. Make sure they're legitimate. And it's not just made for, entertainment purposes or whatever. And that's like, I know this will rub some people raw, but like, there are people out there making equipment, and they have all sorts of fancy names for them. But when you really come down to the nuts and bolts, or the molecular level, if you want to, break it down, right? How do they know, let's just say in theory, that this device can measure humidity, temperature change, EMF, and maybe, a variety of different, variables for those. But when those happen, like the EMF drops, or no, spikes, temperature drops, and the dew point changes, or whatever, humidity changes, that means murder. How do you know this? Like, I mean, how can you design a piece of equipment that can be so specific on environmentals and mean a specific word or something? That's where I have a hard time buying their stuff, and I don't, because it doesn't add up. It seems more of a gimmick.
That's incredible. I didn't even know that was being done. I can't say that I'm surprised.
For a long, long time.
I can't say that I'm surprised. I have a few people that were very heavily leaning on their gear, and I thought, because as a medium, I've gone into many haunted places and experienced many different things in different locations, and it's been really edifying to me when I've heard, and I'm sorry, I don't remember all the names of them, but the equipment that is a radio wave that allegedly allows you to hear a spirit talking. You can ask questions and it responds to you, allegedly, if it's willing or able.
Yeah, the ghost box.
Thank you. So some of those feel very unreal to me. Like, no, this doesn't click. This doesn't. And then there's been other times when it made sense because of what I was hearing.
Right.
And I felt giddy because it was like for the first time.
Confirmation.
Oh, total confirmation.
Yeah.
It's like, I think
here's
my
the
arm's
thing.
broken. My arm seems to be broken. Oh, there's
Right.
an x-ray. By God,
Holy
I have a
moly.
broken arm. Holy
Bingo.
crap. I really do. But it was that kind of a aha, it was very fun. And I thought, but there were other times and I thought, that's not clicking with what I'm getting at all. This is like, that's
really
not even the same zip code. And I was thinking, why? And I wasn't in a place where I could really say that because that wouldn't have been appropriate at the time.
Choose your battle.
Well, it's tough because when somebody's going on a tour or they're on an investigation, or it's so exciting. And if they've,
and you don't want to burst their bubble, but at the same time,
and I don't want to do that.
On.
I want people to have their fun. And if they're really curious and they really want to know, and they've been told that, there's a medium on location, ask. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean they're going to hear everything you hear.
Right.
It's not a perfect anything. That's the hard part about the whole group is that if you're standing next to a medium and you think you hear something and they did not hear it, well, they might be hearing something else. It doesn't mean you didn't hear it.
Absolutely. They are, in my opinion, anyone with, psychical abilities, they are an asset to this field. But the problem is we have a lot of people with egos who think they're more than they are, or they're just charlatans, but, speaking for the genuine, authentic ones, they are essential to this field. And I would never want them not to be a part of it because I trust, in many ways, I trust the human experience, because if you think about what's going on with preternatural stuff or, supernatural and origin phenomena, it all has to have the living involved. This isn't something, it's kind of like that, adage, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, did it make a sound? Right. Well, kind of same thing with ghosts as far as we understand so far, but at the same time, I think having a balance, right, of technology, a critical lens in all of our brains. That's for the the folks that are got the gifts and the abilities to tap in other realms. But we all need to keep ourselves in check because that we're all susceptible to it.
Right.
But yeah, it's like back to the ghost box thing. That all kind of spun off of. Have you ever heard of Frank Sumption?
I don't know that I have.
If I remember correctly, I think he was out of Colorado, and I want to say it was either the 70s or 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Don't quote me on that part. It's been a hot minute, but at any rate, he invented what was called the Frank's box. Well, along the way in discussing the Frank's box, which is kind of like the earlier forms of these ghost box. I think that's really kind of what they're all designed off of. There was some conversation that brought out some information that Frank indicated that he had spiritual guide. So I can see that being plausible. It does seem a little, okay, you made a device, right? And in Frank's case, he's kind of like the OG of it. So that's cool. Right. Thank you for doing that. And I love the concept and everything. But it's a numbers game, especially when you look at the modern day usage of ghost, boxes in the last 10, 15 years or whatever. They're scanning, right? And they've got all these, fancy scanning, algorithms and patterns and whatnot. And so what it is, people are asking questions and it's randomly stopping on on a station and pulling out, the spirits pulling out the word from that broadcast and using it to answer you. Well, I've seen countless, sessions of these, and it's just like a lot of these answers or these responses that people were counting as like legitimate responses from the other side were like very generic phrases, or like, parts of a sentence that was just, happened to be the point where that algorithm opened up and let that word come out, and
Right.
it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
I don't have any faith in something like that. I have more faith in white noise from old mechanical cassette tapes assisting in the theory that they were providing the proper noise or frequency, that sound, that white noise into things, from the mechanical end of it, that was allowing spirits to imprint their voice onto,
I'm a believer in cassette tapes as well.
Yeah.
I
believe that's
really
a
feel
very,
yes.
plausible thing. I think
Yes.
any recording medium can do it. It's just, you got to understand the technology. You got to know
Right.
its limitations, its downfalls, where it
Right.
excels and stuff like that.
Right. But I appreciate you mentioning having a medium on a team, because I know of teams right now, this very minute, that will not include a medium when they go out to research a haunted location, because they feel like they're going to contaminate the site with their comments.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it.
And I
get
thought, so with a couple of them that were newer at what they were doing, I offered to do remote reading. So I'm not there. I'm not going to say anything in front of anybody and mislead anyone or steer anyone in any direction. I'm just totally off site, and do a pre-reading.
Mhm.
And I can't remember the name of the show, but there's a show with a New York detective, The Dead Files, I think it's called. Yeah. So the premise of that I liked, because she was going apart from him and he was doing hard research and she was going in cold, not knowing anything. So that part I appreciate, because that to me gave it a little more credence that they weren't affecting each other directly.
But were they really going in blind? I mean, it's a TV show. We got to remember
I don't know.
that. Yeah,
that's very true.
And
that's
very
what
true.
I'm
saying. It's like, they have a job to do. They got to get ratings. They've got to do all this. So yeah, I find it funny. Like I love Josh Gates and I have a lot of respect for the guy, but he'll be spelunking, rappelling down into a chamber that hadn't had anybody for hundreds, if not 1,000 years.
Right.
And you're watching him come down it and you're like, oh my God, he's in there. The first one. No, he's not. That whole crew that's recording all that, they're there first.
Right.
They were probably scouting it even beforehand.
Right.
And so point is, while the concept is awesome, in reality, I don't think that they're doing that exactly in that fashion, because again,
probably not.
There's a lot
I just appreciated the attempt at least to keep them separate so that they weren't contaminating each other's information. So that to me made sense. And I thought, okay, well, I could do that. I do remote reading. I've done it for over 40 years. Not a problem. And I figured,
I think it's a necessary thing to have that end of the human, the living participation, or that asset. Really, it's more an asset to me to have a psychic, a medium, a clairvoyant, whatever.
because to me,
I really think that it helps balance things out.
I have an analogy for taking a psychic with or letting a psychic help. Not using a medium when you're trying to talk to ghosts is like going to another country and not knowing the language.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
when
a
you
good
talk
analogy.
with a medium,
I like that.
Right? So I know as a medium from years of talking with spirits, like I've been talking to ghosts since I was 3 years old.
Yeah.
That's my earliest recollection, and I can tell you, it takes a ton of energy for them to talk. A ton. They don't have a heart and a brain producing electricity, supporting their soul energy, so they wear out fast. So when you rapidly fire, ask them questions, that's not easy to respond. People don't give spirits enough time to answer questions, number one. Number two, they ask them they talk to them way too long.
Compound questions. Yeah.
It's not practical.
No.
It's like if you were talking with someone that had cancer that was literally in the hospital going through chemo, how much energy do they have? They don't.
Right.
And that's kind of what you're dealing with. You're dealing with someone that's fragmented. They're not their complete self. So they aren't able to take on your bombardment of curiosity. You have to be extremely patient and go more than a few times and give them a lot of time to go through whatever it is they're capable of talking about. And number two, what do they want to talk about?
Right. Yeah,
you're
we
asking
do
them
that
all these
often.
questions. You don't know them from Adam. Why should they tell you anything?
Yeah, we'll ask personal questions like, very cordial, very lighthearted stuff like, do you like the paint on that wall? I mean, things like that. We'll do what we call low profile investigations, where it's not where we're actively holding gear and putting stuff. We have stuff set out, but it's all static. And, we'll have like surveillance, system also recording and whatnot. And we do keep camcorders ready on the fly so we can, fire them up and if something's happening or whatnot. But again, we already have other things doing that. But what we try to do as far as the actual experience of the investigation or that particular case study goes is we try to have these very organic conversations that we might find that they want to, participate in and commune with us. And it doesn't have to be all serious. Like, hey, what year and what year did you die? And what president, was a president when you died or whatever. We don't have to do those things. We can just talk about other things. And it's still very important. It's still great data. It's not a ghost, floating down the stairway at you, but it's still important data.
Right. Well, and I think that's the other thing I wish more people understood. If a ghost is presenting themselves in a physical form, that's the best you're going to get.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like Ghostbusters where the librarian's going to go, shh.
Yeah.
She's holding a book and she's suspended in midair and you can see her complete form for the most part, except for feet.
Right.
And she's not going to turn at you and go, that's not happening. The ability for a spirit to do that would be it. That's all she'd be able to do is shh, because she'd be so wiped out after materializing and talking. That would be so much energy. And it's like, oh, come on, you guys, give them a break. They're trying to make themselves visible. That's a huge gift.
We obviously see that as like a very creditable potential. The ability or the amount of energy in theory that this said spirit or energy needs to take or put out to do those things. I mean, we see it in even modern pop culture. I love that scene where Patrick Swayze's in the subway with the curmudgeon old subway dude, and he's showing him how to get pissed and kick a can, and, so
focus his energy.
Yeah. And I really do think that that makes some sense to me as well from a whatever way I'm looking at it. But
and I can speak to that for a second if you want to hear about that just a little bit. So when people stay, when their bodies die and they stay, the living adjacent, as I've been told, they prefer to be referred to. Oftentimes will help each other. Just like I forget. There's a movie, and I think is it called Dead Like Me, something like that. Anyway, but there's a lot of spirits that are walking down a street, couples, sometimes arm in arm, and they can see each other all the time. And they realize a human can see them. They like stop and start following them because that's exciting that someone else can see them. Most of their knowledge and most of their ability to do things is based on what another ghost has told them, what another spirit has told them. And so it takes years sometimes to figure things out. They don't always know. There's not a handbook. You know, like in Beetlejuice,
Right.
you know, the guide for the recently deceased or whatever that's called.
Yeah.
There is no handbook that I've ever heard of in all my
No,
years
I
of
mean,
talking to spirits. I've never heard of a book that they get that tells them, just like when we're born, there's no manual. We don't have a manual that tells us
right.
your butt's
Yeah.
going to
Pick up your
sag,
arm
you're
and do
going to
this. Yeah.
fart, you know, you're
Right.
going to grow boobs, or you're going to
Yep.
get hair in places you don't have now. Nobody hands
Exactly.
us this manual. So the death part doesn't come with that either.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
we
that,
have
yeah,
to
that
figure
all
things
makes
out the
sense to
hard
me.
way.
Yeah. Trials and tribulations and life
Yes.
and death.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that, the way we approach any kind of potential where you're speaking with, potentially deceased people, we should always do it out of respect, unless you're dealing with more malignant type things, and I'm not talking about non-human things. We don't need that because that's a hot topic. But what I'm saying is, like, there are bad people who die. Obviously, there are bad people in the spirit world as well. So, like, I just think that we have to do our best to try to understand with an open mind, with a critical lens applied to that open mind, to I guess discern the experiences and the data that we get.
Absolutely. So let me pose a question for you. So if there's a ghost team that's watching, a young ghost team, a new ghost team, perhaps, describe for us what in a perfect world scenario would be of setting up an investigation.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, we'll go with the typical like scenario, which would be, say, a home. Okay. We don't put up. So what I would recommend to any new group is, yes, if you can, afford the gear to get gear, that's great. People like me who've been around for a while, we've collected a lot of gear. I've gotten rid of a lot of gear, but the point is, I have the ability now, and it doesn't have to be the highest end, best quality, whatever. I have the ability now to set up not only a surveillance, a good one inside the home that I, using to, monitor just the environment, and also just, watch how we're doing things or anything that goes on. But we also have learned to have some way to have surveillance on the outside of the home, because what happens is your client can be in a friendly conversation with a neighbor and say something, oh, we're going to have this, ghost hunter group show up and they're going to do some work. And then one of them gets drunk at night or something, and he thinks, oh, I'm going to go over there and pound on the wall and freak them out. I'm telling you a real story right now.
Oh, I've heard them.
Yeah. So having that outside surveillance was vital, nice, because we could go, hey, could you tell your neighbor to like leave us alone? Like, we appreciate the the funniness, the humor of it, but like, we're really trying to actually do some serious work here. The other thing I would tell them is, don't buy the gimmicks. Really try to understand, even if it's on a basic level, try to understand the equipment you're using. I'll never forget, I had a team up in Longview, and we were at a notorious haunted location, and I just had this feeling, and I walked up to my crew. They were kind of waiting, we were kind of pretty much set up, and we were kind of taking a break before we actually dove into the investigation itself. And I walked up with one of our camcorders with the IR lamp, everything on it. It was all powered off. And I looked at one of them and I handed it to them, and they were one of my more senior folks, and handed it to them. And I said, hey, turn this on and get it ready to record in dark. And they gave me that deer in the headlights look. And I'm like, what's up? And they're like, I mean, I could try it. I don't know how to. Okay. Do you understand what this is, what we're doing, and why it needs, or why we're trying to use this technology, make sure you get it. Make sure you do the research to understand the technology you're using, because so many groups are going out there with spirit boxes and ovuluses and what is it? SLS, the Connect, basically, all these things. I have used some of that technology too, and I've been just as victim to it. I'm trying to, help them avoid this pitfall or spending money on things like that, because there are white papers out there talking about how some of this stuff is flawed, really bad. And here they're using it as proof that it's detecting spirits, that we don't know how are actually detectable, really, even. So don't fall for the gimmicks, and really think about yourself as an ambassador for history.
Right.
You are there to help preserve the real truth, not what you want or what your agenda might be, for your YouTube channel or for some, a pilot or something that you're trying to shoot for somebody. Think about the long run. I tell new recruits all the time, I'm like, imagine you come into a room and it's just like 20 of the best, highest regard parapsychologists, researchers, you name it, of the world. Okay. There are 20 of them, and they're in chairs in a circle around you, and you're sitting in the middle with your evidence. How do you think that's going to hold up? So,
yeah.
Well,
the other
you
thing
don't have to have the, you don't have to keep up with the Joneses.
Nope.
I mean, you can have a flashlight and a tape recorder or a DAR, I mean, when it comes to other things like EMF meters, Geiger counters, thermal imaging, I mean, you've got all sorts of, things, EMF pumps to, anyways, there's a lot of stuff, and just ask. One of my favorite advice that I give my own kids even is never stop asking questions. Like, as an investigator, that's what I do. I keep asking questions. I'm like, I'm not trying to be rude, and I'm not trying to be dismissive. I want to know the truth. I want to get to the core of this.
Right.
I don't want an easy out.
Right. Well, and I think one of the things I just want to point out to people is learning to work with the supernatural is not like learning to play basketball. It's not like learning to go fishing. I'm the one that gets the phone calls and the emails and the messages that are, Holly, please help me. Somebody came out to my house and things are worse.
Things off. Yeah.
Things are worse.
Yeah.
You don't ever want to hurt anybody.
No.
And you certainly don't want to. It's like calling a pest control and asking them, come help me with this hornet's nest in the roof riser. And they come out and kick it and get in their trucks and leave.
Right.
Like,
thanks.
No.
Yeah.
Bad.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. Yeah. Well, I mean, even from a non, psychical end, say, I've thought of myself as a mop-up crew for a lot of groups. You come behind them and the people are kind of like either jaded or, I mean, it's usually not a traumatized situation, but, I have heard of it. And, you gotta, deal with things with a kid, kid gloves and with some professionalism and tact, but humanity is the biggest thing when you come into an investigation, when you are trying to reach out to that other side and whatnot. I think they can tell if you're, you have good intentions.
Absolutely. So can you share a story about a ghost investigation that you thought was really surprising?
Yes. Matter of fact, I'll go back to that one in Sublimity. It's one of my favorite to always talk about. and you'll appreciate it as well, because when I first got in contact with the clients, it was actually via MySpace, if that says
That's funny.
anything.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, that's dated.
yeah. And they were like, look, you can. I was like, I'm looking for my very first case to do an investigation. I spent the first year or more working on documentation, process, procedure, all that stuff, because I wanted, in my mind, that made me feel more legit.
Right.
Time and experience really make you more legit, and really actually learning from it, and applying those lessons learned. But like they said, we would like for you to bring out a legitimate psychic. We've never had anybody do that. We've had other, crews here, and they've done investigations. And I was like, okay. So I sought out and started interviewing. And, it starts kind of either with your network of people, or word of mouth. And
Sure.
in my case, it was, people I know. And, I think it was like 2 or 3 other people. They were all ladies. And I, interviewed them, and I did some, I tried to kind of come up with some tests, if you will. And some of it was kind of based on like the Ryan Institute and whatnot. I kind of wanted to see if there's, any ability to, touch objects, right, and pick up from that.
Right.
So this particular woman ended up impressing me, and I was like, all right, I'd like to, let's secure this and get her involved and bring her out. So we did, and the whole thing was, she didn't know anything about where we were going, anything. Right. I just said we're about an hour drive or so away, and her and I would chat via phone on the way there, and she was all by herself but following us. And I'd ask her things like, hey, are you picking up on anything at this point yet? And there for a while she was like, not really. But then she was all of a sudden, she was like, yeah, I really got like a picture of an old man, an elderly man standing in a window upstairs looking out, and he looks really concerned. Well, I didn't know that was going to turn into a theme. The client they had done such a good job, because they had gone through this with other groups. They had like 50 years worth of research already that they were able to just show me and hand over. So yeah, they made my job easier. But then again, it's like you always learn in any kind of trade, you never trust somebody else's work. You always still go behind and revalidate or find out if it's not right.
Confirm everything.
Yeah. And some of this you can't, because some of this is, conversations with people who are no longer around or alive even. Right. But you do your best. And so we did. And this lady, the psychic's following us out there, and she says that. And what she didn't know is, in that 50 years of collected data that the clients provided me and shared with us, was a few different accounts of someone seeing an old man up in the upstairs window. And every time people were running into their house, like, who the hell's in my home? Yet to not find anybody. So we bring her. One of the details about this house was it was actually used, early on when it was first built in the late 1800s, as a safe home for like Native American children or African American children or whatnot. Problem was they didn't have a basement, meaning, let's say Joe next door wants to come over and sip some lemonade with you on a hot summer day, and he comes by and you're like, oh crap, we got to put these kids somewhere, because, we don't want Joe knowing, this is that time of that era. And so they don't have a basement to put them down in and keep them out of sight. So they put them up in the attic. Well, if you remember, I said summer.
Yeah. And
they were sipping on lemonade. And I'm just making that little part up, because the point is, there were claims that children had died in that attic, in that home, sweltering in the heat. So our psychic shows up, she gets acclimated, and we start going into the investigation. And she finds herself going up the attic ladder to the attic, and I have this all on video and everything, and the clients were there and everything, and I had already, kind of briefed them and said, look, try not to give her any data, please don't, because like the point is, I believe she has a skill set. What we want her to do is hit it on the head, come in here and confirm some things. She might add more to it even.
Sure.
And she did. Here's what was crazy. On video, she's up there looking around, and she's like, I feel like they put kids up here, like they thought of them like bad kids, right? Again, minorities or ethnically different people of that time being hidden from other whites. And so that right there, she was like, they look like they're just sweltering. And I was like, wow, she even used that word even, right?
Mm-hmm.
She goes down, and of course there's other things that happened during this investigation, but the one other thing to point out that I found was fascinating was she walked into the master bedroom, which was the room she confirmed was where she saw the image of the old man standing looking out the window of the front of the house. She's standing right by that window, and she's like, I feel like there's a box in this wall, like he had something like death certificates, silver spoons, things like that, whatever, right? And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, I don't know what the heck she's talking about at this point. And the homeowners were like, oh, okay. Nothing we can really do because it's, they got really nice wallpaper, on it and all this stuff. So we wrap up. We're driving down the road on our way back. And I get a phone call maybe 20, 30 minutes down the road. They're like, Ben, you're not going to believe this. And I'm like, what? We decided to go ahead and cut into the wall where she pointed and said, and we stuck a camera in there. And sure as hell, there is a man-made box in that wall.
Nice.
And I was like, are you kidding me? And they were like, no, they did confirm there wasn't like any, death or birth certificates or even a silver spoon, if you will, but there were some items in it. And what we surmised was it was probably mostly like, rodents or something that brought those in and was using that box, because it was a box that you could tell was built to hold something, and probably like a safe, if you will, but it was wooden and it was in the wall. So at one point it was accessible and then had been either, I don't know if it was plaster over it or if it was sheetrock or what, because again, I wasn't there for that part. But yeah, pretty fascinating. And that was
amazing.
That was a really amazing experience to have with a legitimate, bona fide, good psychic.
Right.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. I appreciate all these stories. They're very interesting, Ben. How can someone reach you if they have questions about doing research or if they want to ask you about gear? Do you have a way that people can reach you?
Sure. Facebook's a great way always. I'm on there, Ben Robison. The page actually, when how it says like facebook.com/ whatever, it'll say Benigmatic. So that's another way you can tell it's my page. It's a photo of me right here in my office. You can call our the ASAP main line, which is Autonomous Studies of the Enigmatic and Paranormal, and that's 971-200-5276. I would normally throw out an email address, but I think I had mentioned to you, I'm actually working on revamping the website and all these things. So, right now I'm kind of simmering those avenues. But yeah, I mean, Facebook's a great way. And then you can text or call that 971-200-5276 mainline number for ASAP.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I'm always happy to have that conversation and answer questions and see what I can do to help anybody out.
Well, I think that's one thing I've really enjoyed about the paranormal community is everybody's willing to pitch in. They're willing to help. If you ask someone questions, they're not going to hide from you. They're going to say, well, yeah, this is what I found, or no, I've never done that. We're not afraid to admit when we don't know something, most of us. And we're very willing to listen because everybody's got cool stories. Everybody has something
There's some
they've seen or
fascinating
heard.
stories I've heard over the
Oh my
years from
gosh. I've heard
colleagues,
so many.
strangers, you name it. Yeah.
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 Well, and just small details that people
Mhm.
miss, that it's like, oh, really?
Mhm.
And just all these little facets of jewels to me. It's like a basket of rare jewels, all these stories,
Yeah.
and getting to look at them and examine them and check them out. It's a treasure to me to hear all this stuff. It's very
Absolutely.
fascinating, and I feel like it makes it more tangible when we can
Yeah.
share what we've seen and heard and been around.
Right. Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely.
Definitely. Well, I'm definitely going to have you come back because we have a
I would
lot
love
more to
to.
talk about. And
Sure.
hopefully we'll get to do some research together because I think that would be super fun.
That would be
So
great too.
this is
Absolutely.
Holly from Holly's Pandorium saying thank you very much for being here. And as my dear friend Jay likes to tell me and remind me, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe. It takes 2 seconds. It doesn't cost you anything. And it helps spread out the podcast to people that are similarly interested. So take a moment and do that if you wouldn't mind. It just takes a second. Thanks for sticking with us to the end. And I'll see you again soon. This is Holly and Ben. Thank you for staying with us, and we'll talk again soon.
Have a great night.